When I was a young child, the idea of birthdays was very popular in my family. Like most, I would look forward to my birthday and would count the days down on the calendar. My family would go all out for birthdays, giving us cake, balloons, and having a big party for us. This would extend to all members of my family, including aunts, uncles, cousins, and my siblings. This did not apply to one person in my family, however. That person was my grandmother Maria. As I had aged, I began to notice this more and more. We would celebrate everyone's birthday except my grandmother's. I had began to become curious as to why, so I would ask my parents looking for an answer, to which they would respond, "We just don't celebrate it." Not satisfied with that answer, of course, I began to do some independent research for an answer that I was satisfied with. I began with the date December 7th, 1941. Looking into that date, I had stumbled across an event called the Pearl Harbor Attack. As I looked more and more into the event, I began to realize the history behind it. The Pearl Harbor Attack was an event that had taken place on the day of my grandmother's birth, December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor was a surprise attack done by Japanese forces on the United States. The attack happened at a naval base in Honolulu, Hawaii, just before 8 a.m. on Sunday morning. What would follow would leave a major and long-lasting impact on not only the history of the United States, but the history of the world. Japanese forces would use airplanes to bombard unsuspecting United States Navy forces. The United States and Japan had been butting heads for decades, and it was evident that some sort of conflict between the two nations was inevitable. Japan was looking to expand their empire, to which the United States was not too happy with. So in response, the United States would go on to place economic sanctions on oil. Oil had played a major role in the functioning of the Japanese army, so without it, it would weaken Japanese forces. As tensions continued to rise and negotiations between the two nations failed, seeing conflict as imminent, Japan decided to strike first. The surprise attack lasted around 7 hours. Japanese forces would go on to drop bombs on the United States to crush their Navy ships and troops. When the event was all said and done, more than 2,300 American lives were lost, and countless more were injured. The attack came as a surprise to pretty much all Americans and would leave the nation crushed. Shortly following the attack on the naval base in Hawaii, then President Franklin D. Roosevelt would formally enter World War II, which had been taking place for quite some time in Europe. The United States would ally with Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and many other nations forming the Allied powers, and would go on to fight against the Axis powers, which had included the forces of Italy, Japan, and of course Germany, led by Adolf Hitler. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a catalyst for the United States to enter the war, which would go on to last another 4 years after the United States had joined. The United States would go on to develop the first 2 atomic bombs with the Manhattan Project, and would use both bombs in Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a form of retaliation against the actions done on Pearl Harbor. The bombs would go on to incinerate both cities and would claim the lives of hundreds of thousands. That I was able to learn, it had allowed me to gain a better perspective as to why my grandmother did not celebrate her birthday. My grandmother was a first-generation American, which is something she was extremely proud of. She had felt that the United States represented opportunity for those who came with nothing, as she had done. Being the proud American my grandmother is, she grew up studying and learning more about United States history. She was saddened to learn that she was born on a day met with so much death, and that would pave the way for so many more to lose their lives. After learning about the events, my grandmother would go on to use her birthday as a day of remembrance for all those who lost their lives on that day. When I had realized this, it had allowed me to recognize that my grandmother and I had experienced this event much differently. Rather than seeing her birthday as one of celebration and fun, my grandmother sees her birthday as a day that represents the loss of life. I was able to speak with my grandmother individually and let her express her feelings. Now on her birthday, both her and I go out to breakfast in the morning and use the rest of the day to remember all those brave individuals that lost their life on that day.